one of the biggest mistakes I think business owners make is they do business planning, but they fail to consider succession planning. So they do asset protection planning, tax planning, but then when it comes time for succession planning, there is no plan. And what succession planning is basically it's two things. Number one, what happens if the owner of the business, the main player in the business, the key player, or one of the key players passes away or becomes disabled? What happens to the business in that case? The second factor in business succession planning is when you have multiple owners, multiple key players, and one of those owners decides, well, I don't want to be part of this business anymore. Or the owners can't coexist for one reason, personality clashes, disputes, whatever the case may be. They don't want to coexist. So, what does that look like? What's the exit plan at that point? So, when we talk about first the death of an owner, if the owner individually owns the company or the entity, at that point, if they pass away, the entity lives on, but there's no one there to operate the entity, right? And so it's going to basically go according to either what's established in an estate plan, or if there is no estate plan, what's established by state law of the residency, or it could be state law of the where the entity is formed, or the state law of the residency of the decedent. One of those two is going to dictate, who takes over the business at that point. And it may be somebody that they don't want. In a single owner type business, it may not be the end of the world because it's just one owner and it doesn't really matter in essence, because the main person has passed away.
Sure.
Where it could matter, though, is if they have employees or people working under them or third parties that they work with, independent contractors who rely upon that business. And all of a sudden now you have this person that's entering into the fray, making decisions on behalf of the business that these people don't even know. And they don't know if they know anything about business. They may not be business savvy. I mean, if you haven't set up your estate plan and chosen the right person to come in and run your business, well, then it could be some random person that has no business skills at all, no financial acumen at all, that's then coming in and taking over the business, and they very well could just run it into the ground at that point. Now, what happens though if a key person passes away or dies and you have multiple business owners? Well, those business owners can continue to run the business, but unless you have the right succession planning, you could end up with this third party that then steps in and starts running the business with the other owners. And they may not like that third party. That third party may or may not know what they're doing in that space. So to avoid that, you basically need a couple of things. So the first one is what we call a buy-sell agreement, which a buy-sell agreement is a document that basically says that if somebody, exits the business by death or disability, that there is a process for basically purchasing their interests and some third party doesn't get involved. For example, a lot of businesses, they have key man life insurance, which means if one of the owners passes away, there's a life insurance policy, and that life insurance policy does two things. It infuses capital into the business to basically pick up the slack where, that owner normally would, and allows them to maybe hire somebody to take that person's place in the business. And then it provides an amount that can be used to basically buy out or pay off the estate of that deceased member. You can also have disability insurance, key man disability insurance, where if they become disabled, you have an amount that goes to the business So you can hire somebody to fill their role, so the business can continue to operate effectively and smoothly. And then you have an amount that pays monthly to that disabled member so that they are taken care of, and it's part of the buyout process. Along those same lines, that buy-sell agreement can be used in the scenario that I mentioned before, where you have owners of a business that just can't coexist, or one owner wants to just, maybe they get along, but one owner wants to explore something else. They don't want to be in this space anymore. And so that buy-sell would say, okay, if an owner wants out, or we need to basically separate, and do a business divorce, here's what that would look like. Here's the amount that would have to be paid. Here's how the business is going to be, valued. And there's a process for that, so that there's no need to go into court and fight about it. No need to go into court and try to dissolve the business, or, seek, damages or a payment because either A, you can't coexist, or B, one of the owners wants out. So that's business succession planning. And unfortunately, a lot of my clients, they do the asset planning and they do the tax planning, but they kind of neglect the business succession planning. And I think that it's something that should be considered in operating and running a business equally with the asset protection and the tax planning components.
Well, I think it's such an important thing, especially for multiple owners, because like you said, they're going into business with somebody is like getting married.
Mhm.
You want to make sure that dynamic works, that there's that the two or the multiple people work well together. They're in it to make a profit. And the last thing anybody wants, well, obviously nobody wants their partner to pass away. But this idea that you could go into business with somebody expecting to do something, and maybe it works out great. Oftentimes it might not, but the idea that a new third party might show up in the deal that you didn't bargain for. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but you didn't sign those documents planning to be in business with that third party. And for that reason alone, it seems to me that no matter how small it is, if there's multiple owners, they should plan for that contingency, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it happens, unfortunately. I mean, you know, circumstances arise in life that we can't control and we don't foresee. And then, um, the businesses that are structured and set up properly continue on. But the ones that aren't generally will fail and dissolve and go by the wayside.
And going and speaking to another point that you made, in my experience, where partners or members of an LLC or multiple owners have planned for their exit strategy, if that comes up, where they've planned for that, in my experience, it doesn't get litigated. Basically, they call me up, they're like, "Well, this happened, we planned for this. Here, he's getting the capital, or she's getting this is what we're gonna do, draw it up. We plan for this," and so on and so forth. It's when they haven't planned for this, right, that it ends up being litigated.
Yeah, and business divorce litigation is not pretty. I actually, um, at a prior firm, practiced in the business divorce department for 2 years, and I saw and experienced, frankly, the stress of that type of litigation. It's basically family law on steroids, and it's not something that you wanna be involved in as a business owner. It just isn't. It's very taxing both financially and emotionally.